Do you love the Tabernacle Choir? This year, the choir's music is everywhere you are. Listen to your favorite choir songs and music and the spoken word anytime you want on Alexa by simply enabling the skill.
Alexa, play music in the spoken word.
Now playing music in the spoken word.
You can also download the Tabernacle Choir app, subscribe to the choir on YouTube, listen on Spotify, and have access to all their wonderful music. Happy listening.
It's time for the Larry H. Miller Utah Summer Games at Southern Utah University in Cedar City. Register today to participate in the 40th anniversary season of a Utah sports tradition at utahsummergames.org. Participate in over 50 sports around the state. Then plan to join the opening ceremonies Friday, June 5th, presented by State Bank of Southern Utah. Register today to participate in the 40th anniversary season of the Larry H. Miller Utah Summer Games.
It's Friday.
Work is done. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
It is Friday, right?
Work just started. I just started working.
Thank God it's Friday.
Wow. How original.
I've never heard that one before.
What a fine day.
It's almost the weekend. Let's get it started in here. It's showtime, baby.
Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome in on a Friday morning. David Locke, radio voice of the Jazz, is going to join us coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. Pablo Mastriani, RSL head coach, at the top of the 9 o'clock hour. David Locke here at 8:30. We'll talk NBA playoffs with David Locke. Rudy Gobert with a big game defensively. Aaron Gordon was out, calf injury. Denver's shorthanded. You figure they're going to lean on the Joker, but he was 7 of 26 shooting the ball. Rudy Gobert got to him. So Minnesota now up 2-1. You know, one of the other things we'll talk to David Locke about is Keontae George. David has made the point statistically that Keontae, worst defensive player. There's nobody else on the perimeter in the NBA worse guarding the ball than Keontae. And I am curious if the Jazz will show him, or if he's on social media and he's seen, or both, that bite after Game 2 when Atlanta beats the Knicks, and C.J. McCollum goes wild, and he gets asked, were you out there hunting Jalen Brunson, small, undersized defensive guard? What do you think? Oh, yeah, I think yes. Yeah, I was. Yeah. I mean, that is just cold-blooded. And that stuff happens all the time. It's so obvious, and you get asked about it, and that's the response. It's like, Keontae, the Jazz could be in the playoffs. That could be you. You got to get better defensively. You got to take what you applied last summer to your mental health, the whole thought process, the way you approach the game, the improvement you made on the offensive end. Those things are all real, right? And they're to be commended. But it's a process. There's more to do, and you've got to make the same steps on the defensive end of the floor that you made on the offensive floor last summer, because otherwise that's going to be you. And that's going to help the Jazz determine whether they have to pay him or not, and the answer to that will be no, Angel, move him. Now, it's a cold-blooded world out there, but that's how I see it playing out. So I think it starts with the acknowledgement of, hey, learn from your mistakes, but more importantly, learn from other people's mistakes. If someone else is suffering, learn from that. Don't go through it yourself. So we'll talk with David Locke about that coming up. The other playoff series, Atlanta did win, by the way, again at home. So they're up 2-1 on the Knicks. And in Oklahoma City and San Antonio, just like the best teams in the league by a mile. And we'll see. It's 2 months to grind, and you got to stay healthy. And Wembanyama got the concussion, and we'll see how long Big Vic is out, if he's out at all, whatever they do with him. But everybody else looking vulnerable. I assume Boston's going to emerge from the East. Cleveland could not shoot the three. They got beat. They're still up 2-1 in their series with Toronto. But, man, the starters have combined 5 of 25 from the three-point line. The bench actually shot it well, 9 of 20. But the starters, yikes. The NHL playoffs continue. Tonight, your Utah Mammoth are back in action. Game 3 at the Delta Center. Looking forward to that. They're 1-1 with Vegas. And this is one of the perks of doing what they did in the regular season and staying in front of all those other teams scrambling to get into the wild card. The Kings got that last playoff berth, but they got to play Colorado. And they're now down 3-0 on the verge of getting swept. And the Mammoth avoided that matchup. And I can see why they wanted to. It's on full display for all of us to see, man. Colorado is rolling. They had the best record in the regular season, and they are now up 3-0 on the Kings after beating them again last night. Colorado just looking awesome. See if they can wrap it up, get a little time off, fewer games, fewer collisions, be fresher, avoid injuries and getting worn down and all that kind of stuff. So Colorado sprinting through the first round. Carolina's up 3-0 on Ottawa, and Buffalo went to Boston and won 3-1. So they're up 2-1 in that series. And our game coming up tonight, TBS 7:30, and you'll hear the game right here on The Zone with the Golden Knights and the Mammoth. Also, the NFL Draft. Fernando Mendoza, the top pick, but Ty Simpson did go. The Rams decided, here's our quarterback of the future. So they used the 13th pick in the first round. They take Simpson. Now, they don't need him right away. They got a quarterback. They got a pretty good quarterback. But nonetheless, Matthew Stafford isn't going to play forever. So now they've got the guy who can sit on the bench and learn kind of a Green Bay situation. I think Stafford's under contract for a couple of years right now. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. He can go at any time, and he could add another year on. So, but it seems a little bit like Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre, or Love leaving Utah State and waiting behind Aaron Rodgers. Whether it's 1 year, 2 years, it was 3 years in Green Bay in both those situations. At this point, Stafford just turned 38 in February, so we'll see if he plays another year, 2, 3, what he plans to do. But Simpson's all lined up to be the guy, and the Rams are rolling the dice on him. And McVay's been good with quarterbacks. He has good reps, so it looks on paper like Simpson's going to in a good situation, but you never know, and we'll see how that develops. As far as the Utes, they both went just about where you would expect. That was kind of the ballpark. All the pre-draft analysis was pretty much spot on. Spencer Fano goes 9th. The Ute lineman goes to Cleveland. And then Caleb Lomu goes 28th, and he goes to New England. So there's that. The Chiefs traded up. That was a little bit. They must really like the LSU quarterback, Mansour Lane, because they traded up to the 6th spot to get him. And the other storyline I mentioned I was watching is what will New Orleans do? They traded away the former Weber State star, Rashid Shaheed. He went to Seattle and, of course, helped them win the Super Bowl. So that worked out for Rashid and for Seattle. And now New Orleans, they've got got a former Ute there at wide receiver. And, Devon Vele played a little bit and got some catches, got some yardage, got some experience. But they brought in Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. It's an intriguing pick because when he's healthy, he was outstanding at Arizona State. But he also got hurt a couple of times. So how durable will he be in the NFL? And obviously there's room for, 3, 4, 5 receivers, whatever, on a roster. We'll see what Devon Vele does in New Orleans. They've got Olave, obviously, the former Ohio State wide receiver, and he's established as their guy, and now they got Tyson. So we'll see where Devon Vele fits in. But those are some of the local stories. I was looking also what the Giants were going to do. Can they go worst to first? Somebody always does that. There's always somebody who makes that jump and surprises everybody. It was the Bears this past year, right? Great turnaround season for Chicago. And who will be next year? And I think the Giants, they'd be the true worst to first. I think there are other teams that could do it. It's kind of cheating, but the Lions could do it. Now, the Lions are 9-8, but they get the 4th place schedule. They finished last in their division. That's not the typical worst to first. I mean, they had a winning record. It's like they missed the playoffs by half a game. But, can they pull that off? Another team, New Orleans, again, 6-11. They weren't awful, and that division isn't great. They were only 2 games away from winning the division because everybody else in the division was 8-9. So the sheer mediocrity of that division opens it up. Maybe New Orleans could pull it off. But I think for a team that's actually way down, I'm intrigued by what the Giants do. Hiring John Harbaugh, we saw the effect of bringing in a veteran coach with Sean Payton going to Denver and Jim Harbaugh going to the Chargers. So John going to New York, does he get a turnaround there? And what are they going to prioritize? And man, line of scrimmage, toughness. They went for the linebacker, Arvell Reese. Not a down lineman, but still a guy who plays in the box. They went for him with the 5th pick to help the defense, and then they went for Miami's offensive tackle, Francis Malgoa, with the 10th pick. So the beef, bring the beef. We'll see what the Giants can do and if they can turn their fortunes around. So those were some of the storylines I was following. I thought that was some of the intriguing stuff. The other thing to watch in the draft is, always look at the strength of various conferences. And the SEC's had the most first-round draft picks, and it just means more, blah, blah, blah. They had 7 this year, which is good, but nothing special. Ohio State and the Big Ten led the way. 10 players from the Big Ten in the first round, the most of any conference, and largely because of Ohio State. Carnell Tate, their star wide receiver, went 4th. Arvell Reese, a linebacker, went 5th. Sonny Styles, another linebacker, went 7th. And then Caleb Downs, a safety, went 11th to the Cowboys. So Ohio State providing 4 of the first 11 picks. I mean, that is outrageous. And I think that kind of puts the pressure on the coach, because when you got that kind of talent at the top, you're expected to do more. And I know when they won the national title, so he's got one, but do they expect 2 and 3 years, 2 and 4 years? I mean, you're paying for that kind of talent. The NIL is real, and they got so much talent, it's unreal. So 10 Big Ten players get drafted in the first round, 7 players from the SEC, 6 from the Big 12, including 2 Utes, and 6 more from the ACC. And then it rounds out with a couple of guys from Notre Dame and only 1 player from the group of 5. And that was San Diego State corner Chris Johnson. They had a great defense. They lost a lot of people and coaches and all that. It's going to be hard to do that again. Chris Johnson goes to the Dolphins with the 27th pick. So that was the only guy from the G5 that went in the opening round. So the Big 12 holding its own with 6, same as ACC, similar to the SEC with 7. And we'll see with the second and third rounds coming up tonight how it plays out for the various conferences and how that all kind of rolls out. And a little bit of bragging rights there, but also tells you a little bit about the talent as well. All right. And the Big Ten, it's having that kind of year, right? They won the football title. They won the women's basketball title. They won the men's basketball title. Now they got the most first-round picks in the NFL draft. The Big Ten is rolling. They've got the money, and it shows. And no need to apologize for it. It's not like it's dirty. Those are the rules now. That's the way the game is played. Is it different? Yeah, it's different. And the G5, obviously, the transfer portal is impacting the number of guys who get drafted in the first round. And the guys with that talent are either going to get signed immediately by those schools, or they're going to get picked off pretty quickly. So, all right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, more on the NHL playoffs coming up. Matt Larkin from Daily Faceoff joins us to talk about the matchup tonight. It's game 3 with the series 1-1. We will hear from him next. Stay with us. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome in. Matt Larkin joined us from Daily Faceoff yesterday. Covers the National Hockey League, giving us the lowdown on Game 3 tonight. We talked to him yesterday, so there might be a few tomorrow references in there. But you get the point. Here's Matt Larkin on the NHL playoffs and the Mammoth and the Vegas Knights, Game 3 tonight.
Good morning. It must be an exciting one in your neck of the woods. Big game coming on Friday.
I would think the last 6 minutes of the second game, wound people up who were already pretty wound up. So now it's 1-1. What did you learn from 2 games? What do you know about this series that you didn't know when it started?
I mean, so far I've seen a lot of what I expected to see. I had that series really close. I had it going 7 games. I think Utah and Vegas are very similar teams in terms of what they do well. They're both great at driving the play. They're both great defensively. I have Utah winning this series in 7 games, and now you have the split. You've got home ice advantage because of that split. So it's sort of it makes me sound cocky, but it's kind of playing out exactly as I expected so far.
Good. We like to hear that, and then we're glad we have you on. With that in mind, that would obviously mean that Vegas would win in Salt Lake, and then Salt Lake or the Mammoth would have to go back to Vegas and win. And you see that, or I guess my question would be, why do you see that as doable?
I think, to me, when two teams are just so evenly matched, goaltending is the tiebreaker. And yes, I know Carter Hart was really hot down the stretch for Vegas, but Karel Vejmelka, to me, has been so consistent all year long. He led the Western Conference in wins. He's handled really high volume, and I think I trust him more right now over the course of a long series. And Carter Hart, he's been on fire, but he hasn't played a lot of hockey, of course, in the last few years. So I think Vejmelka is more built to last over the course of a series.
Obviously, the Mammoth had a few young guys who are just, Gunther and Cooley especially, who are just really arriving as they move to town from Phoenix. And Cooley seems to be backing it up he did have the injury as a bit of a setback this year, but he seems to be backing it up. And I have to say, there's almost some kind of stamp of approval in my mind that the league's giving him when a veteran player looks at him and says, I'm going to bleep and kill you at the end of the game. Like, what did he do that deserves the death penalty? It struck me as veteran guy realizes this guy's a handful, and let's see if we can intimidate him. And obviously the answer to that is no. He scored the game-winning goal in Game 2, but do you see that as kind of the league giving Cooley the stamp of approval? He's arrived.
I think so. I think it kind of backfired on Dowd in the sense of it's a sign that Cooley's getting under his skin and that he's effective, he's dangerous, and I think it kind of is a microcosm of how the season's gone. And Logan Cooley, of course, he did miss time, but I think, especially as a goal scorer, he really surprised this year. We knew he was dynamic as a playmaker, but adding the goal scoring to his repertoire, I think now we know his ceiling is just as high as everyone hoped it would be when he was taken in the top 3 at the first round of the draft. And, of course, Dylan Gunther, to me, has been really effective in this series. He made a big play on to help to set up the winning goal and scored 40 goals this season. He's dynamic, he's big, he's fast. And, of course, Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz, the guys on that line have had great years. They've been so reliable over the past several seasons. But I think the difference this year is the step forward that Cooley and Gunther have taken.
We saw in Game 1, and I'm reading Vegas papers. I know some of the guys down there, they're talking about it, that it was clear that the Golden Knights came out and were trying to send a message with the physicality and all this, that we're going to basically rough you young guys up and whatnot. What do you think of that strategy in terms of being correct or maybe backfiring and firing up and getting the attention a little quicker than might be expected of the younger Mammoth?
I think it makes sense that Vegas is going to try to do that because they're a veteran team. They have multiple players who have won the Stanley Cup in 2023. They're going to try to assert their dominance, maybe intimidate a lineup that has a lot of guys who've never played a playoff game before. But I think what they take for granted in that case is that Utah has plenty of players who are able to mix it up, whether it's Mackenzie Weegar, even Ian Cole's really experienced. He won Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Lawson Krause is a big, strong guy. So is Jack McBain. And then, of course, Mikhail Sergachev can handle big minutes. He's a big guy. He's won Stanley Cups. Brandon Tanev's a really physical forward. So I think that Bill Armstrong has done a really good job building a team that isn't just skilled, but also capable of winning in multiple ways. And that includes if you want to have a really physical hockey game.
It also seems to me like a younger team with no playoff experience gets it as the series goes along, and you can get tougher and realize, hey, the checking's a big part of this. We got to be physical in the playoffs in a way that maybe the regular season doesn't demand it. But on the other hand, it looks like the quicker, the faster, more athletic team is a Mammoth, and I don't know how Vegas is supposed to get faster, more athletic. And I get why, they're lining guys, putting 3 guys on the blue line there because they can't give the Mammoth space. It seems like when the Mammoth gets space and they start skating, they're just blowing by Vegas guys. Is that something we're going to see more of as the series goes along?
I think so, and I think it is one of the reasons why I picked Utah to win the series. I think, Vegas is still a good offensive team, and they were much better at once John Tortorella took over in terms of the underlying play-driving numbers. They actually were tops in the league. But Utah, the fact you can spread your lines, you can have Keller and Schmaltz on one line, you can have Gunther and Cooley on another, and even the third line, you can have J.C. Peterka, who's dangerous as well. I just think there are so many dynamic groups that bring a lot of speed and skill, and it could be overwhelming for Vegas. It's still going to be close because Vegas does have excellent defensive forwards in terms of just the matchups, whether it's Mark Stone, Mitch Marner. Those are 2 of the best defensive forwards of this entire generation. So I don't think it's going to be dominant one way or another. Sense the way things have played out so far because Utah does have a lot of skill, a lot of speed, and they can overwhelm opponents.
Since you're picking the Mammoth to win in advance, who did you pick that they would be playing?
So if we look at that side of the bracket, that specific part of the bracket, which means that Utah will be playing the winner of Edmonton and Anaheim. And as I filled out my bracket, I think Utah beats either of those teams if it advances to round 2. So I actually have Utah going to the conference final in the West this year.
Oh, that's good for sports radio. Thank you.
We'll take it.
All right.
Now, when you throw that out there, do you hear any reaction from some of the people you work with, people who read you? What is the feedback? You're crazy. That's a bold pick. I see where you're going with that. These are all coin tosses. That pick is as good as any other one. What was the reaction?
I think it depends on who you talk to. So if you're more of a modern thinker and you like to study the analytics a little bit more, I think a lot of people in that camp have really liked Utah this season and labeled them as one of the sleepers to make a deep run. On the other side, if you're more interested in the intangibles and just the idea that the style of hockey is different in the playoffs and a lot of players are going to struggle to gain the new experience, then maybe I'm overreaching, expecting a relatively green team to go that far. So I think it depends on the camps that you're involved in, and I could see it both ways for sure.
A lot of our listeners are new to this, right? And everybody loves a story. And so the Jazz are down their rebuild here that they've been going through. Looks like it's over, but nevertheless, they haven't had postseason in a number of years. And so the fresh story is the Mammoth, and they've been able to capture the attention. And now with their playoff, that we have some form of playoffs. It's in terms of in the spring, it's hockey now. And so there might be learning as we go. And we know in the NBA, they put a big premium on the home court, and Utah was tough to play. What level of emphasis or premium do you put on home ice advantage?
I think it depends on sport. So it's undoubtedly most prominent in basketball, and that's just something we all know historically, that it's most skewed in terms of home records being dominant. It still is an advantage in hockey for sure, and I think it's more pronounced in the playoffs when the games get more aggressive and physical and players feel that adrenaline. I think you really saw it. So I was in Buffalo for games 1 and 2. The Sabres make that comeback. You could feel them feeding off the momentum of the crowd as they fought back over that wild final 8 minutes in game 1. They were clearly being fed by the energy of the crowd. So I think it is an advantage, and I expect it's going to be significant for Utah. And I'm going to date myself here, but I still have memories of 97-98 NBA Finals watching Phil Jackson put the earplugs in, playing the Jazz, right, at Delta Center. That was a really rabid, loud building. I know those same fans technically have aged 30 years, almost 30 years since then, but I suspect they've passed down the same habits to their kids, and I'm expecting a really loud, raucous building for game 1 and 2. Or game 3 and 4, I should say.
Right, I got you.
One key to the series so far, and it's been a real problem for the Mammoth, is they're 0 for 5 on the power play. At the same time, Vegas is 2 for 5. Vegas with the empty netter and the 2 power plays, you can say a lot is resting on this. Do you think those numbers hold, or do they have to even out a little bit just by the nature of the sport? And if they do even out, is that a major problem for Vegas?
I do think it'll be a problem for Vegas, but I do think they also match what we saw in the regular season, right? Vegas had the number 6 power play in the NHL, 24.6%. Utah was down at 18th, 20%. So that was, on paper, one of the advantages that Vegas held over Utah going into the series. It's not necessarily going to be that skewed all series long, but I think it makes sense that so far we're seeing Vegas more effective on the power play. It's something that Utah, despite all their talent, they haven't quite figured that out yet. It's something they're going to have to work on, I think, over the next couple of years.
Since you've already said you've got the Mammoth winning a couple of series, how much of that is that you have a belief in the team, the organization, versus maybe it's just a bracket situation that they can take advantage of?
I think it's both. I think that Utah is a well-constructed team, and I think the proof of that is just the fact that I have them beating Vegas, because Vegas is a good team too. But I think also the other part of the bracket, Edmonton and Anaheim, are more flawed. So if Utah does get by Vegas, I actually think it's going to be an easier series in round 2. So it's kind of, I don't know if it's a cop-out answer, but I truly believe both. And then if you look more in the long term, I just think Utah is a franchise set up very well to contend for years to come, because you have more prospects on the way that are very high-end prospects, whether it's TJ Ginla, Caleb Denoyer, And not only does that mean there's help coming, it means that there's more flexibility to trade some prospects too if you have an extreme surplus. So I think this is just the beginning for what's going to be a long era of Utah being a contender.
That sounds very good in the long run. I think in the short run, people hearing this are like, oh, I get why they can beat Vegas and I get why they can beat Anaheim, but they had real problems with Edmonton. You think those could be overcome if it comes to that? I mean, there's no guarantee either team will be there, let alone both of them. But let's just, for sake of argument, say it's both there. They really struggled with Edmonton in the regular season.
They did, but if I remember correctly, they struggled with a healthier version of Edmonton. So right now we have Leon Draisaitl. He's back, but he's still not 100%. And then you have Connor McDavid, who tweaked his ankle last night. We think it's his ankle. He was not himself for the rest of that game, and we don't know whether that's going to hurt him for the rest of the playoffs, whether he's going to be able to shake it off. And that's scary for a team that's already notoriously top-heavy. They need both those players to be dominant. And I also think, just with all due respect to Connor Ingram, if you put those two teams up against each other, if it was a hypothetical series of Utah and Edmonton, again, the advantage in net goes to Utah with Vejmelka. So I think this is, compared to the Oilers teams that made the Stanley Cup final the last couple of seasons, this version of the Oilers is much more flawed.
All right, there's Matt Larkin talking hockey. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll hear from KSL's Cole Bagley on tonight's game. Stay with us. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Cole Bagley joined us to talk NHL playoffs. He joined us late in yesterday's show. Let's look ahead to Game 3 tonight with Cole right here on The Zone.
Yeah, I think if Utah can win this series, not saying that they will, but I think what we saw in Game 1 and 2 is if Utah can play their game, if they can utilize their speed, I just don't think that Vegas can skate with the Mammoth through 3 periods of play. And obviously they're two very different teams. There's the Knights are they're going to wear Utah down with their physicality, right? They're going to wear Utah down by extended ozone possessions and using body checks to move them off the puck and to create space in front of the net. Whereas Utah, I think what they did well in Game 2 is not that they tried to play Vegas's style, but they combated the physicality to a really effective level, right? I mean, they out-hit the Knights 39-33. They didn't try to be anybody that they weren't, and then they utilized their speed to create off the rush to break down Vegas quickly, because what Vegas does defensively really well is they deny extended ozone possessions. They're able to use, again, their physicality to bump guys off pucks to win battles and to break out really fast. Whereas, Utah in Game 2, which is different than Game 1, is I think they recognized that. They made the proper adjustments. They recognized, hey, we're probably not going to be able to fully possess the puck for a long amount of time. And so when we get in the offensive zone, we're going to have to move quickly. We're going to have to utilize our speed. And that's something that they do really well, and they obviously were able to win Game 2 and even it up.
How much did Game 2 and winning it just maybe remove any doubt that these guys can do it, and now there is more than just belief? There's actual factual evidence.
Yeah, I mean, when I talked to the guys after Game 1, I don't think that it discouraged them, to be honest with you. I think, they still had a belief. I talked with a handful of players like Ian Cole and Kevin Stemmen and what have you, and, I just asked them, where do you feel like, you guys need to do a lot of things very differently, and it just was minor tweaks. It just was a couple of small things. I think they were able to do that in Game 2, which probably, raised their belief, and instilled even more confidence in them. And, right now Utah's got all the momentum. They stole Game 2. They evened up the series. Now it's a best of 5 with home ice advantage for the Mammoth. And, if they can win Game 3, I think that this series, potentially, really starts to favor Utah.
If I break this down period by period, I can argue they've only lost one period, the third period of Game 1. And for the team that didn't have the playoff experience and was supposed to be trying to figure this out, it seems like a pretty strong message.
Yeah, I would say that they definitely lost the third period in Game 1, and then I would say that the first period of Game 2 was probably their worst period of the series and one of their worst periods of the season. Vegas just kind of built on what they'd accomplished in Game 1 during that third period going into the first period of Game 2, and Utah just looked I mean, it looked like Vegas was going to run away with Game 2 and take a 2-0 series. But, Utah, I think that's where maybe some of that, inexperience kind of started to filter in. But then, what we're seeing from Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley, you talk about the future and how bright the future is of this team, and that's still true, but it feels like that future is kind of right now. The fact that these guys are showing that their game is built for the playoffs. I mean, these are two young players that they've only played 2 playoff games, and I would argue they've been the 2 best players on the ice, between the 2 teams, especially Logan Cooley, who I believe can be the X factor for Utah. If he can continue to attack the net, utilize his speed, he's going to be the difference, between, whether or not Utah can really win this series. So, Utah's playing well. Vegas, if Vegas wants to stay in this series and they don't want to let it get away from them, they have to adjust. They've got to figure out ways to, maybe get back to how they played in those periods, right? In the third period in the Game 1 and in the first period in Game 2, or else I think Utah's just going to skate them right out of the building.
How about if Utah can limit turnovers, being loose with the puck? How much of a difference will that make?
That's huge. I mean, that's everything that I think Utah needs to focus on defensively. And I was able to talk with Andre Tourney after the game, and I asked him, look, you obviously just won Game 2, but it is. How would you assess the puck management in this game? Is that an area that you want to see improved? And he said that's one of the biggest things that they need to work on going throughout the rest of the series, because that's what kept Vegas in the game. And that Vegas is a good team. They, as Tourney put it, they have a say in what happens, and part of their game is to be fierce on the forecheck. That's what helped them win Game 1, and that's what kept them in Game 2. That second goal from Vegas came because they were asserting themselves on the forecheck. They forced Mikhail Sergachev to make a mistake. They pounced on it. They quickly entered the zone, and Utah got caught flat-footed, and suddenly, instead of a 2-1 game, it's 2-2. I think that was 62 seconds after Utah had scored. So, puck management is going to be big, and it's hard against a team like Vegas because they're so assertive. Every time that Utah's looking to clear the zone, there's a Golden Knight within a couple of feet who's ready to deliver a punishing hit and put Utah down on the ice or into the boards. And so I think for Utah it's again playing with speed. That's the biggest overlying factor for Utah to find success, not only out in the offensive zone but in the defensive zone, to be aware of where Vegas is at all times, to be aware of where their outlet passes are, and then at the end of the day, if there's nothing there, you just got to flip it out. And I think that's where Sergachev made that mistake, is instead of elevating the puck, instead of just recognizing that the pass wasn't going to get there and sending it off the boards or elevating it, he kept it ice level. He kept it flat, and that's how Vegas picked it off and eventually scored. So, puck management I think is going to be huge and is going to play a major factor in whether or not Utah can win this series.
Cole, you have been following the league longer and more closely than PK and I. We're still figuring stuff out here. But I see a few trends here, and I'm curious your reaction to these trends and which one you think is going to change most quickly. There are 3 trends that have all gone against the Mammoth, and yet the series is 1-1. If you told me these things were going to happen, I would tell you they're down 2-0. 1, Vegas is 2 for 5 on the power play. I mean, they were good on the power play, but 40%, come on, that can't be sustained, right? The second thing is the Mammoth are 0 for 5. Now, they weren't very good on the power play early in the year. They were very good late in the year, but 0 for 5, that's got to turn. And Clayton Keller, top 20 in the league. Actually, I think tied for 15th in points with 88. And he doesn't have a point yet. I mean, you told me these 3 things. They're all true. I thought they'd be down 2-0. Which of those things is most likely to change? How many of them will change, and how big an impact will it have on the rest of the series?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, if you look at those, overline, if you look at those statistics, I mean, if you hadn't watched those games, you probably would think that Utah would be down 2-0 because special teams is huge. I mean, a lot of guys talk about how, playoffs are determined by small moments. A lot of those small moments end up being power plays. And the fact that, Utah has struggled, it's not surprising necessarily. I mean, Utah for most of the season was one of the worst power plays in the National Hockey League, whereas Vegas has one of the best PKs in the entire National Hockey League. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that they've struggled there. And then in terms of, power play for Vegas, yeah, I mean, 40% obviously is productive, but I think what Utah did well, especially in game one, was limit power play opportunities. I mean, Vegas was just 1 for 1, right? I mean, you're not giving up 4 of 10. If you're giving up 4 of 10, yeah, you're definitely trailing in this series 2-0. So, that one might be a little bit misleading. And then as for Clayton Keller, playoffs is just a different game. If you look at Vegas, Jack Eichel and Mitch Marner haven't done anything, right? I mean, Jack Eichel, I think, was the first or second leading goal scorer amongst all Americans in the National Hockey League. I mean, he played a pivotal role in the United States winning gold over in Milan. And, I think he has maybe an assist. He hasn't been productive. And, same thing with Mitch Marner. I think he has 1 assist, and beyond that, he's been pretty invisible. Now, Mark Stone, the captain of the Knights, he's playing on their top line. He's been, pretty good. But for the most part, the top lines are just kind of canceling each other out. They're not doing much. And so, what it's required for both of these teams to get a win is to, are they winning the battles amongst, the deeper lines, right? I mean, game 2 was defined by Utah's second line playing lights out. I mean, Dylan Guenther, Logan Poulet, even Kyle Yamamoto playing incredibly well, scoring 2 goals and leading the Mammoth to victory. Whereas in game 1, it was the Knights' fourth line. They dominated the fourth line battle. Nick Dowd scoring, that is not going to happen very often. And so that's, I think that's where you kind of have to look at is playoffs is a different game. Things are going to happen, and so other guys have to step up. And I think another thing to look at too is I think Karel Vejmelka has been spectacular through the first 2 games, and going into this series, I had talked about, I wrote this, I did this huge, deep dive analytical piece where, just looking at save percentages between both goalies and what was their save percentages and wins and victories and, what was how many goals did each team average in their wins as opposed to losses. What I was able to kind of calculate is if Karel Vejmelka can stay between 2.5 to 3 goals per game against and about a 900 save percentage, maybe a little bit less than that. Save percentage I think is a little bit misleading at times. They're going to have a chance to win this series, and so far, I mean, that's what he was able to do through these first 2 games. He's obviously Vegas scored 4 goals in game 1, but that was a little bit, there was an empty netter. Whereas in game 2, he only let in, only 2 goals, right? Utah wins 3-2. So, I think there's just so much that goes into playoff hockey where it's the same game, but it's different. And, I think if Utah can replicate how game 2 went as often as possible through however many games are going to be left in this series, I think they're going to come out on top.
Do you expect Vegas to continue in terms of physicality or to be more or less?
I think they need to be more. That's a big reason that they won game 1. I mean, in game 1, they had 51 hits to Utah's 31, I believe it was, so 20 more hits, and a lot of those were just pulverizing. I mean, Ian Cole got dropped twice. Alexander Kerfoot got thrown into the bench. Sean Dursey, got dropped twice as well. And so, you look at that result, and Utah just kind of got bullied in game 1. It was hard for them to sustain their style of play through all 3 periods. And, if you look at the way that game went, Utah started hot, but then kind of got worse as the game went on, whereas, Vegas came out a little bit flat, but they improved through all 3 periods, which is, why they dominated the third and ended up winning the game. You look at game 2, and it was the polar opposite. Utah kind of started slow, Vegas came out hot, and then Utah started to dominate Vegas with their speed because, they combated that physicality, and Vegas didn't really know how to play against it or to match it. So I would expect that Vegas maybe tries to replicate game 1 in terms of their physicality where, they're punishing Utah every single play. They're finishing checks. They're hounding them on the forecheck. They're creating turnovers because, in turn, that's what's going to help them find success.
We have heard Andre Tourny say pregame, postgame, day off, over and over. We have to get bodies in front of the net, and we got to get the puck in front of the net. And maybe some good things will happen. And sure enough, they've done that once in each game, twice in the series, and it's worked. There have been bodies in front of the net, the puck in front of the net, and it's gone in. It hasn't been pretty, but it counts the same as Dylan Guenther's one-timer. So what are the odds they will keep getting those breaks? Is that sustainable, these crazy bounces that have led to goals?
That's a good question. It's hard to say, exactly how the puck's going to bounce, right? But, there's a saying in hockey where, if you put pucks on net, good things are going to happen. If you want to score goals, you got to go to the net. And, they've obviously had some really lucky bounces. There's been a few, right? Kevin Stenlund's goal was a lucky bounce. Mackenzie Weegar's goal was a lucky bounce. But, it takes those types of moments, as I was talking about earlier. I mean, the playoffs are defined by small moments. And, I think it helped Utah ease into their offense, especially in Game 2, where they were not creating anything. I think they were outshot in the first period like 12-5, and then they flipped that script on its head going into second and third period. And I think it's because they finally saw the puck go on the net. Didn't matter how it got there, but it crossed the line and it evened things up, and it kept them in a game in that first period that they really didn't belong in. And then they continued to crash. And I asked Vitek Vanacek and Kirill Vejmelka before the series started, how is playoff hockey different for goaltenders? And they both said it feels like there's suddenly more bodies on the ice than before. Guys are getting to the net more often. They're crashing harder. There's, more traffic, and you have to be aware of that. And that's been true. And I think that Utah has done, honestly, the better job of just getting pucks on net and crashing hard. I mean, that's how Mackenzie Weegar scored. That's how Logan Cooley scored the game winner. Dylan Guenther utilized his speed, went straight to the net, tried to put one home. It wasn't there. Logan Cooley crashes and he taps home, probably the easiest goal he's going to score these playoffs. So, yeah, you have to keep going there, because if you go there, eventually you're going to score greasy goals. And I think in the playoffs, there's so much less space. Things are so much tighter. Those seams are clogged up. It's harder to generate goals like Dylan Guenther scored. Those one-timers are just not going to be there as often. And if they are, the goaltender has done his homework and he knows it's coming. Whereas if you just get pucks on net, you crash, you're going to score a lot of greasy goals. And so for Utah, they've got to just continue. That's how they have to utilize their speed, right? They're not going to necessarily body Vegas off the puck time and again, but if they can utilize their speed, get pucks on net and crash, really, really hard, I think they're going to beat Vegas to the puck more times than not and continue to score those types of goals.
All right, there's Cole Bagley. Coming up, David Locke at 8:30, Pablo Mastriani at 9:05. What is trending? The headlines are next.
Make game day yours. Tickets, food and drinks, stats, and streaming. Everything you need is in the Utah Mammoth app. Download today and make game night easy. Download on both Android and iPhone. Tusk Top.
Derek Overstreet, founder of the New Millennium Group. We're a financial planning firm. We have advisors standing by right now to take your call. 888-999-6370. The reason you're going to want to call is we're going to help you retire 3 to 5 years before you thought possible. The way we do this is by putting together a step-by-step plan. So if you're one of those people listening and you'd like a plan in writing, give us a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370, or go to utahsfinancialplanner.com.